A lot of people think of intuition as a gut feeling, something you feel in your stomach. But something that you feel in your stomach doesn't necessarily come from the ethers. Sometimes it comes from your fight or flight mode or it telling you not to take a risk. It could come from fear. It could come from love. It could come from a lot of different things. So when I talk about intuition, I really talk about the aspect of you that is linked to a world where there's no time and space, and it can see everything. You tap into your soul and tap into your soul's wisdom because your soul has an agenda, and its agenda is your success. So that's the kind of intuition I encourage people to seek out. And it comes in so many different forms. It comes from gut feelings. It comes from what people call psychic abilities. It comes from just downloading, getting lots of information all at once. And it even comes from the outer world.
Welcome to the Spiritual Forum, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I have a really fun guest today. Can't wait to introduce you to him. But I just want to thank you for doing all the things you do to participate in the Spiritual Forum podcast. And part of that is being a subscriber to the newsletter. You can subscribe at thespiritualforum.org and also subscribe to the YouTube channel and rate and review on Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff that helps this podcast be a platform where we are broadcasting hope, inspiration, and awakening. So let me introduce you to my guest, Happy Ali. Did I get that right? Is it Ali?
Yes.
Okay. I should have checked before. Happy Ali is a prophetic dreamer, certified master,
NLP.
neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, certified master clinical hypnotherapist, and host of the Happy Insights podcast. With a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from UCLA, he's the author of the Intuition Bible, How and Why to Tap into Your Inner Wisdom. Happy's spiritual journey began in 1995 when he dedicated his life to the exploration of metaphysical disciplines after he experienced a near-death experience. Today, we will be talking about tapping into our inner wisdom, which we also call intuition. I think this is always a very, very, very important topic, important to tap into our intuition. And I also think particularly in these times that can be very, very, very confusing. So much is going on out there. Intuition is so important. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome, Happy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, Reverend Carol.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And to let our audience know, you are sitting in Los Angeles where all the fires are.
Yes.
And I know it's just a very unsettling time.
It is, but I have to realize that there's always something going on somewhere. So it's always an unsettling time. So it's important to balance yourself in it. But sometimes it's in your backyard, or my kids can't go outside because of the air quality. So yeah, it's hit home right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, we are all praying for awakening, for healing, and for just embracing everybody who's there. And I have 2 daughters there, so I've been really having my finger on the pulse as well. So I appreciate your showing up today in light of everything that's going on in your life.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I'm very, very glad to be here.
Well, before we start, I mentioned before that I'm going to try the rapid fire questions with you. And I want these answers to be kind of short. And then we'll kind of, if anything's really interesting, we'll dig into it when we talk about your life. But here they are. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. In a brief couple sentences or phrase, what would you say your life message is?
That we are not alone. There's great intelligence and support that's always here to help us, and that we create our own life. And it's good to listen to the inner whispers that allow us to live the life we're meant to live.
That's a great message.
Is that good? Okay, just checking.
That's a great message. Yes. Okay. Is a person outside of your family who has influenced you?
A person outside of my family who's influenced me. Probably Esther Hicks. I think she's really influenced me a lot. and all the other teachers, the great teachers, but living outside of my family, I would say Abraham Hicks.
Okay, that sounds great. Do you have a word or phrase that you live by?
I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm loved, and what's the other one? I'm healthy, wealthy, and free. That's the one that is just looping in my head all the time.
I think there's a song.
I'm healthy, wealthy, loved, and free. Yeah, whenever I have time or whenever I have extra time, I let those things loop in my mind just to remind myself in case I forget.
Okay, that's beautiful. Last question. If you could go back and spend one day, any time in history, what day would you pick?
Oh my God, what a big one. I would want to go back to the very first human, like Homo sapien, and the very, very, very moment the first version of us was born. And I want to know what happened. That's probably my biggest, question. And it's not recorded history, so it doesn't count. I guess I don't know if you wanted recorded history, but that is our history.
I love that. I think that's a great, great choice. Really great choice because you share with me that you kind of question things and that would be a big question to get answered. What happened there? What was that? That's a great, great answer. So thank you for sharing. So let's now dig into, who is Happy Ali and generally what is your spiritual journey, not your whole life story, but, and briefly, why don't you tell us your story about how you got to being a person who's sharing all about intuition and helping us access our own intuition?
Well, I really am lucky because I was raised in a family where I spent most of the time with my grandmother, and she was kind of superstitious and religious at the same time. So she would teach us a lot of stuff about how you can ask for things and things are given when you ask. And she was a prophetic dreamer and she could dream stuff in advance. And we always, talked about our dreams and kind of compared whose dreams would come true when. And that was kind of the beginning, my upbringing. And then I moved to the United States and, for a while, you're a teenager, you don't know what's going on. And then there was a moment, and I say this story, and I always think it's so funny that I say this story, I tell this story. I was a big Madonna fan at the time. I'm a gay guy. She was the only diva at the time. And I was 15. I had just gotten my driver's permit, and I wanted to go to her house, but it wasn't like can't go to their house. There was a picture of it in the in a magazine or something. And I decided I was gonna go drive and find her house. And all I knew that it was that it was in the Hollywood Hills. So I just went and the Hollywood Hills, it's not like there's no like straight grid lines. It's very uh, swirly. The streets are very swirly. You can't really figure it out unless you know where you're going. And I remember getting to each stop sign and just asking myself whether I should make a right, left, or go forward. And I did not make a single U-turn, and I found myself in front of her house. And that was something that really created a shift in me that made me realize that, wait, there is something that comes through you that really is, more aware of the big picture than what you think you have access to. And then I had a near-death experience. It was a self-induced near-death experience where I almost died. And I didn't die, but I somehow tapped into something greater. And when I was 17, I downloaded basically books and books of um, information that would later create the person that I am. And overnight, I felt like I went to sleep one person and woke up somebody just with a lot of knowledge about how the universe works and how to be happy, that we are infinite beings and that we're all energy. And there was stuff that I was not taught, I thought maybe I had died and they had replaced me with a older, wiser soul so they can use my body or something. That part I didn't understand yet. But then that's kind of how it happened. And when that happened, it just changed my perspective on the whole world. And it made me just be the person that I am now. And later I discovered that I was a prophetic dreamer through really good stuff and bad stuff. And that changed my life. I dreamt the birth of my children. and I'm gay, so it's not that easy to have children. And 4 years after my son was born, I dreamt his death and his mother's death. And that kind of made me the certified prophetic dreamer in the family. And then after that, I started communicating with him in my dreams, and he led me to the birth of my children that I have now, my twins. So it's been like a journey of receiving messages from inside and following it and letting it kind of show me the way. So that's kind of the, that's all of it in a nutshell.
Well, let me go back to the Madonna thing because I find that really, really interesting. I do think that we have all of this inside of us and we don't need all the GPS. We don't need all of the instructions. We don't need people to tell us what to do. We don't need so many laws and rules. I think that we know where to go and what to do when we're really tapped in that way. And it's so interesting that at that young age that you really trusted that so well. The consequences wouldn't have been bad for you if you hadn't made it to her house. So it was probably an easy thing to trust. But it was fascinating that you knew to go left, right, left, left, right. It's fascinating to me.
I'm still kind of shocked by it. I mean, even though I know what I know now, you know what it was though? I got to tell you, somebody said, Happy, you're intuitive. Can you tell me about this thing? And I had never thought of myself as intuitive. And I think that kind of sunk into my brain. And somehow I accepted that as fact that I'm an intuitive person. And when I signaled my subconscious that I'm an intuitive person, it kind of opened up a pathway to me being intuitive. So I think your belief system has a lot to do with how much information you're able to retrieve, because there's so much information coming at us at once from the outside and inside. And your subconscious has to whittle it down to this tiny little fraction of what you're actually getting based on what's relevant to you based on your beliefs. So I think because I believe I am an intuitive or I'm a prophetic dreamer, more of that comes. And that's kind of why I wanted to write my book the way that I did, to show people that it was possible for everyone and we can be anything that we want. And being intuitive or having access to the inner worlds is of benefit to all of us. And I think a lot of people don't really realize the importance of intuition, because when I want to speak on it and I tell people, hey, I have a talk that I'm doing on intuition, they're like, oh, okay, okay. And they kind of talk about it like it's not that important. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like the most important thing you need to learn learn to gain proper access to. And to me, it's such a big thing, but people just think of it as a hunch or a gut feeling. And that's what their interpretation of the word intuition is. And I think people just dismiss it. They're very easy to dismiss the concept. And I really do want to change that.
Well, I think it's one of the most important things. I mentioned that, particularly in this world where there's so much media and so much influence out there, and people are drawing everyone to certain belief systems, and we can be very, very gullible. And if we don't have an intuition that we can trust, if we can't find that inner voice and discernment is also important. I don't know if you just have a distinction for discernment and intuition or not, but both of those things seem very important. Do you think that they're the same, or do you see them as differently?
Well, I think they're kind of like wrapped in the same category. And your intuition is the one that's kind of giving you feedback. There's so many different levels as well, so it's really hard to just put intuition into a single tiny category. I say anything that comes from anything other than your logical thinking of based on the things you already know is intuition and inner worlds. Discernment could come from things that you already know as well, based on your past experience, unless I'm mistaken or I'm saying it wrong. But it's kind of, if you tap into the well of intuition, it's like an extra resource that you have, and then you can decide if that resource is valuable at that moment or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe it just takes discernment to to hone your intuition, rather than completely 100% rely on external data and information.
And we need to have discernment because we need to have balance. We need to have the intuitive mind and the logical mind all working all the time. And then you decide where that middle point is, where the balance is. Because you can't just be an intuitive person who's just listening to your inner voice all the time and ignore what's happening logically. And you can't be the
Hmm.
other either. And I think a lot of people are so into just picking a side that somehow they end up just lopsided. And I think it's really important to find balance between everything. And I don't want to demonize the ego and I don't want to demonize the soul. Like everything is there for a reason. The dark is there, the light is there, everything is there for our transformation. And that's where discernment comes in, I think. To figure out, just know that everything's there for you to help you or evolution and transformation, and now you have to make the best choices you can in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you rely on your logic and when you rely on your intuition and when you rely on the senses and when you go inside, that's all discernment as well. I have to admit, full disclosure, I'm a very logical person. I love logic, but unlike a lot of logical people, well, I shouldn't say that. I think it's logical to trust your intuition. I
That's
think
what
it's
I always say. You just
logical.
quoted me on that one.
Okay. I was gonna say, I think to me, it's so logical to think that there's something beyond the five senses. It doesn't make any sense that the only thing that I can see or hear in my narrow bandwidth. I mean, we know that humans only have a certain bandwidth for what we see and what we hear, and there's other animals that have different bandwidth. And I think about God, the allness of all, is not going to quote see reality just like a human does. It would be the allness. So why would we say that logically only what I can see and what I can hear is reality? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I agree with you. You just quoted me on, and I literally was teaching my children about the small bandwidth of light that we can actually see and how there's so much in the room that you can't see. And if you just believe that all you see is all there is, you're just living a, fraction of what reality is. So it was funny. I was trying to teach them how everything is being created in your mind by your brain. So nothing really looks like this. Your brain is what's making it look to you like this. So it's a big rabbit hole that you can get into.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. Why don't we talk a little bit about different kinds of intuition so people really kind of know what it is that you're talking about?
So a lot of people think of intuition as a gut feeling, and a gut feeling, something you feel in your stomach. But something that you feel in your stomach doesn't necessarily come from the ether. Sometimes it comes from your fight or flight mode, or it telling you not to take a risk. It could come from fear. It could come from love. It could come from a lot of different things. So when I talk about intuition, I really talk about the aspect of you that is linked to a world where there's no time and space, and it can see everything. You tap into your soul and tap into your soul's wisdom because your soul has an agenda, and its agenda is your success. So that's the kind of intuition I encourage people to seek out. And it comes in so many different forms. It comes from gut feelings, it comes from what people call psychic abilities, it comes from just downloading, getting lots of information all at once. And it even comes from the outer world because the world is an extension of you. You are just a cell in this huge world, in this galaxy, and what you see in front of you is possibly a message that the universe is giving you about how you're doing, and it gives you little help. It gives you a lot of help. Excuse me. It gives you a lot of help, guiding you, showing you patterns, letting you overhear conversations that are relevant to you right now. So the more you acknowledge that you're not alone and that everything is there for you, the more you can tap into that. And of course, you have to listen to your fight or flight. But fight or flight keeps you where you are because it wants you to be safe based on past experiences and also your biology because you got to stay alive. So that's where the five senses are very important, because if you don't listen to the five senses, you might step into a ditch or hurt yourself. But the inner world is on a whole nother frequency, and everyone receives inner information. It's just, you dream, everyone dreams, everyone, it's always 2020 in hindsight, when you got a gut feeling that said don't do this, but you did it anyway, and then you saw how it turned out. So it's just learning how to decipher the language of your particular subconscious and how it communicates with you, because everyone's different. So when I teach it, I say, learn your language. Don't try to copy someone else's language. If something works for someone, it doesn't necessarily mean it works for you. But everyone is being communicated to by their inner world.
I think a lot of people would take exception to that. I do believe that that is true, but I do not know a lot of people would say, "Well, you're an intuitive, but I'm not. I don't hear angels. I don't hear voices. I don't see visions. I wish I did. I don't. You have this gift and I don't."
Yeah, and that's based on their belief system, their priorities, and what they're able to consider important. It's really important to understand that your belief system is what you're getting. Whatever you believe in is what you're getting. So if you don't think that there's any value to intuition or dreams or anything, your subconscious will delete any internal data that you might get. So you will not see it. I have an aunt who doesn't believe in this stuff, and she had an experience where she literally was on her bed communicating with all her dead relatives. And I write about it in the book, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but she was literally talking about to her dead brother who had just recently passed away, and all the dead relatives. And her mind was, at that moment, she was having like a psychosis almost, where she couldn't understand what was going on. But she was telling us, yeah, everyone's here. I don't know why everyone's so upset that people die, because death is not real and all this stuff. And then as soon as she came out of it, her brain couldn't make sense of it. So she got short-term amnesia, which she would forget things really quickly. And then that night when she went to bed, her brain decided to delete that entire day. So it deleted the entire 24
Oh, wow.
hours. So it would be seamless, as if she went to sleep on Tuesday and woke up on Thursday. It literally deleted the whole day. So when I tell her, I'm like, you were able to see the dead, and she says, no, that was probably just my imagination or something. But luckily, her son has video cameras everywhere, so she got to actually see herself. And even
Interesting.
with all of that, she still denies it. She doesn't deny it happening. She doesn't think it's relevant or important. So her belief system deletes it. So that's what I think happens to a lot of people. Whatever is important to you is what your subconscious lets you see.
That's so interesting, and it also checks with what you said about when somebody told you that they thought you were an intuitive, and you accepted that, you didn't deflect, you didn't say, "No, that's not me." You took that on as part of your identity, and then as it's your identity or part of who you are, then you're welcoming all of the inner stuff that's going on, whereas somebody who goes, "That's not me," I think that's so interesting that you can actually delete or just cut off. I can think you could cut off, but deleting is really interesting. So if I don't identify as an intuitive, I'm not going to be having much intuition going on in my life.
You will have it. You'll just won't be aware of it. It'll delete it for you. It happens all the time. That's why when two people look at the same event, they will walk away with two different versions of the event, because it's all being processed by the mind. That's why in my book, I really put a lot of emphasis on the subconscious mind, because the subconscious is controlling everything. It's the gateway to everything that you see. There's something called the reticular activating system. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's kind of the law of attraction, but for your brain. It basically finds things that are relevant to your belief system and seeks it out and brings it to your attention. So in
Okay.
every moment, we're receiving about 11 million bits of data from internal and external sources. And we can only process about 160 something. So 99.9996% of everything that you're receiving is being deleted, distorted, or generalized. So
That's fascinating.
luckily, like when you just on a non-spiritual level, if you realize that all that information is still going into you and being recorded by you, just tapping into your subconscious alone will give you information beyond what you think that you have access to.
That's fascinating. Sorry, I have a little cough.
It's okay. I can barely breathe. I have my asthma.
Yeah, you got all the
throat,
smoke.
my throat is closed up, so I have to like
Okay.
take these weird breaths. So if I feel like I'm being so weird, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, this happens. Coughs tend to come up in the middle of a podcast. Okay, so it's like all this information is coming to us all of the time. It's not like some people can access it and others don't. It's not like if I identify as intuitive, I get it, and if I don't, I don't. It's all there, but my subconscious mind is just deleting.
Yeah, it's storing it somewhere, and maybe you have access to it through hypnosis. It's doing a lot
Okay.
of work. So anything that seems impossible won't happen for you. It's the same thing with law of attraction. That's how law of attraction works. If you don't believe that you're worthy of something, even if someone's telling you that you're amazing and they love you, you will think that they're lying or they're a fraud, or you will find a way to justify that what they're saying is true because you are not worthy in your mind. So everything comes down to the belief systems of what we believe. So we're living the reality that we think we're worth. And we are.
I see that. So when it comes to dreaming, do all of us, I mean, a lot of people just don't remember their dreams. They say, well, I don't remember my dreams. Is that also an example of subconscious kind of purging
Yeah.
that?
I
Or
mean, if you think about it, if you don't, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
that's okay.
If you think about it, if you think dreams have no value, why would the subconscious even bring it to your awareness? I have
Yeah.
twin sons that are 8 years old, and one could never dream before, but the other one always dreams. And we would talk about our dreams a lot. The one son that dreams and and we would just talk about it all the time. And the other one started thinking, oh, maybe I do need to remember my dreams. And I remember for years he never remembered anything. And now he tells me these long tales of the things that happen. And I can always tell if it's a real dream or if it's a made up dream. But I'm like, Daddy, I just remembered my dream. So today, not today, it was like yesterday maybe. I said, hey, look, see, you remember your dreams now. It's because now he thinks it's important to remember. And also, the way we wake up in the morning makes you forget the dreams too. If you wake up with an alarm clock, you will most likely forget it much quicker than if you wake up naturally. But we all dream, and not all dreams are important because some dreams are just your subconscious processing the information and doing its scientific work. And some dreams you're accessing other dimensions and realities. And some dreams are kind of a preview of how your mood has been and how you're manifesting in life. And sometimes you get to talk to dead relatives. Sometimes you get to see things in advance. There's so many different versions of it. Dreams are basically, I think, where we came from is where we go when we dream. Like I think someone said, you wake up when you sleep. And when you wake up in this reality, you're going back to sleep.
You're going back to sleep. Yeah. Yeah. I can get that. Yeah. It's really interesting. So, I mean, I think some people don't want prophetic dreams. Like they don't want to see the future. They don't, don't, that's a burden. I don't want that. And so I would think that they would kind of cut that off if they could.
I've done it. I've done it a lot of times where I just said, I need to shut everything off. And then when I'm ready, I kind of turn things back on. I think it's important to know that you have certain tools and you have access to certain information. And in one part of your life, you might not feel so grounded and you might not want anything outside of what's in this, realm of life, which is the five senses. And and sometimes you are more curious. You want to know more. You want to expand your horizons and go outside of your comfort zone, and you would want information from new world, an inner world. So just because you're tapping into your intuition doesn't mean you have to listen to it all the time or tap into it all the time. It's like telling someone to learn to play the piano and they think of it as you forcing them to play the piano from the moment they wake up till when they go to sleep. It's a skill you have. It's something new that you have that enriches your life. And that's what I like to consider it as, like tapping into intuition, learning about intuition. And sometimes I am a teacher of intuition. I teach it to others. And sometimes I'm so caught up in my issues that my intuition completely shuts off. And I have to use so many different techniques just to get a little bit of information out. And I do it. Like when my grandmother died, I was finishing up my book and I was not grieving her properly. So I was shut off from my own intuition. I thought, how ironic. Of all the times I feel shut off from my intuition is when I'm writing and about to publish a book about intuition. So it's just another ingredient to the enrichment of life.
Does your intuition, is it always leading us to the unfoldment of our soul? Is it always guiding us in the direction that our soul is meant to go? Or or is it always sending us like in a positive direction? And I see difference between that.
It's not always sending us in the positive direction. It is definitely for the transformation of your soul and whatever is best for you, because there might be a battle coming up, for example, and you might need certain muscles and certain skills for what's coming. So your intuition might lead you to something that feels uncomfortable because that's where you're going to gain those muscles for something that's forthcoming. So it's not always leading you to the most positive thing. Sometimes it's leading you to something negative just to see if you are who you say you are. And sometimes it leads you to something amazing. And it's done a lot. I mean, for me, like it showed me the death of my son. And I know that's a hard pill to swallow for so many people. But at the same time, I feel like it showed me that his death was destined and the accident wasn't really an accident. So a lot of people quickly say to me, if you dream of me, don't tell me about it. Or I hope I never have prophetic dreams. And I tell them that it's not my job to tell them about their lives. It's their job to figure out how much they want to know and how much support they need. And I'm connected to another realm, another world. My kids believe that their dad sees the future because that's all they've been raised around. I remember I woke up one day and I said, "Grandma's dying in a couple of months." My grandma, their great grandma, and we grieved. We grieved 2 months in advance, and then she got sick the next day. It was one of those things where, but I knew she was not going to make it, and that kind of was helpful because it allowed me to have closure with her in a way that I might have not had closure. It's not always good, but it's nice to know. It's what I like to consider intuition and tapping into all of those. It's like having a really wise friend who has your best interest at heart, and it's being able to consult with that friend and having that extra resource that you didn't have before. And sometimes you listen to your friends. I mean, if you're in a bad relationship and your friends are telling you to break up with a person and you're madly in love, you're not going to always listen. You're going to go through it until and you feel like you can't do it anymore. So it's just like having an extra friend. And wouldn't it be nice to have an extra friend who wants to talk to you and give you advice based on what it knows is right for you?
Well, I'll bet you're a very interesting dad at career day at your kids' school.
We have we write books with the kids, so we write these little cute books and we read them. So that's kind of fun. Being an author kind of gives me that little perk.
Yeah, my dad sees the future.
They know they're not allowed to talk about that stuff at school.
Okay.
So
Okay.
We tell them, we talk about human magic, which we believe in, which is manifestation and creating with your mind. And I teach
Yeah.
them. And one of them is really emotional and has a lot of acuity with his focus. He's very, very focused and he can manifest things so fast. He's done it since he was small. And the other one doesn't have a really great focus, but has emotions, but his manifestation abilities suck. So he always gets sad because the other one gets all the luck. But the other one also gets all the bad stuff happening to him too, because it works both ways.
Interesting. An interesting competitive thing with those twins.
Manifestation.
Oh. Well, in your book, the first half of it is really talking about all the different, well, a couple of things. I think it's talking about what is intuition, how does it work, and what are some of our blocks. And then the second half of your book, you're helping people to develop their intuition. Is that a good characterization of?
Yes, perfect. Because I wanted it to be like a textbook that would really demystify the intuitive process because it's such a vague concept to so many people. And I also work with the subconscious mind because I'm a hypnotherapist and an NLP practitioner. So I wanted to make sure that how I formatted the beginning of the book would kind of release resistance, allowing people to open up. And I know so many people just wanted me to get to the good stuff really fast. But I said, if you really want results, kind of trust me on this process because it really will allow your subconscious mind to kind of open up and let information in. And then the second half is all practice and exercise. And some people will do that, and some people will not. And I wanted the book to be really good in case you never did the exercises. Hope I accomplished that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's good to talk through like what are some of the blocks. You want to share? We've talked about like belief is one of the blocks, and one of the things I thought was really interesting is that people have a hard time quieting their mind, and they think that the mind chatter is really something that blocks them. But you said something different. You made it sound like the quiet isn't as necessary for your intuition, that it's really more about trust and being open.
Yeah, well, there's lots of different blocks. Sometimes the blocks are about how you feel about yourself or what you think an intuitive person is or that what it implies. Some and you don't might not want to identify as that. Sometimes the blocks could be that you don't slow down and quiet the mind long enough to tap into your inner wisdom. Sometimes the blocks could be other people around you. There's so many different things. That's why I kind of listed as much as I could based on my experience with my students. And I really felt like there were some that were really powerful. But I think the biggest block is the belief. That's the number one. But there's so many different blocks and there's so many ways you can misinterpret information. That's, I think, the biggest thing to consider. Because once you learn how to tap into your inner wisdom and you receive information, there are things that could potentially allow you to misinterpret the information because everything is being translated by your subconscious and your conscious mind. And if you have an agenda and you don't want the answer to be something, you will justify it. You will do anything you can do to make the intuitive message be what you want it to be. So that one's a huge one, misinterpretation. If you're using your gut for receiving information and you have indigestion, or if you haven't eaten well, or you're sick, or you're going through, a detox period, it's unreliable. It's totally unreliable and you can misinterpret. There's so many different ways you can misinterpret, but I think one of the biggest ones is when you have an agenda. When you want the outcome to be a certain way, no matter how loud your inner voice gets, your agenda will kind of dilute it or to make it just disappear.
Yeah, I had a guest, Madhavassetti, on last year, and he talked about intuition. That really the first thing you need to do. And he's not an intuition expert, like you are, but he said it's really important to to clear your biases because you're going in with all these biases. And it's kind of what you're saying. Your intuition isn't really going to be clear if you've got your biases. Your biases are speaking. And in my ministry, I have run across mostly people not trusting their intuition, not trusting the inner voice, not trusting their divine guidance. Those are other words that I would have for it, because they can't discern if it's their ego voice or if it's the voice of their higher self or their guides or their inner self or whatever. And so that's where the discernment comes in. Is that my ego that's speaking, or is that my inner voice?
And it's important to kind of take the message that's coming through and look at its qualities, its attributes. Is it positive? Is it empowering? Is it based out of fear? And kind of discern or decide what you believe the quality to be. And if it's positive, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. It just matters that you're receiving some insight, because at every moment, every thought that we have is just there because we're tuned into a certain frequency, and we receive a lot more thoughts like that. So if you're tuned into a very positive frequency because you're just in a good place and you're receiving thoughts that are really helpful, who cares where they come from, as long as they're helpful and they make you feel like you want to wake up in the morning and live, in this world. And you can be just completely shut off from your intuition with lots of good thoughts and live a really good life. And who cares? Who really cares? And I think us as humans
Yeah.
are where we get the information from. But just get in a happy place, and then see what comes. And then if you want to know more, then tap into more and more and more. And I think a lot of people um, right now are really confused, like you said, with all the information coming at us through TikTok and the news and all sorts of places. And sometimes I like to just do a check-in. Like, should I even watch this program or should I read this? And I check in, and if it feels good, I do it. If it doesn't, I don't.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good gauge. At the same time, though, we also talked about how intuition isn't always leading you to what's positive. It also could be leading you to your life lesson or something that you need to develop. So that's kind of where it gets tricky.
Well, it will dangle a carrot to the bad place. So it'll make it look like it's a good place. So it doesn't say, oh, there's something scary there. Go that way. Go that way. It'll say there's something good over there. Go that way. And then you go there and you're like, oops. And then once you're out of it, you realize you've learned something really important. So it never
Yeah.
says don't go. It always says go to whatever direction. It's usually your fear that says don't go and keeps you um, still. But sometimes, um, you know, there are people who were going to board a plane and something told them not to go. And
Yeah.
that's sometimes the intuition just speaking very loudly. But it happens in so many different ways. That's why if you've read my book, you'll see I don't ever like teach any specific. I don't get too detailed in the process where people just expect it to be one size fits all. It's very different. For me, it's very different because what meant something 2 years ago means something different for me now. So I had this death avatar that showed up in my life. Every time I would see this woman in my dreams, somebody would die two and a half to 2 months later. And that's been my constant for the last 16 years. And I had this dream of her 2.5 months ago, and we were mending broken angel wings. And I woke up and I'm like, someone's going to die. And it's been 2.5 months and nobody died. But we had this fire today or yesterday or this week. And it's the only thing that I could think that it could mean. And now I'm helping people mend their wings. And I thought, oh, that was very symbolic and interesting. But because I'd never had that experience before, that was kind of new. So I'm kind of relearning, okay, what it could also mean. But for 16 years, it was reliable. Now something new's popped up, but it did forecast a dramatic event. And, so it made me think, okay, this is life and it's supposed to be like that. And I had more faith in the universe because I could get mad at the politicians and mad at coincidence and why there was wind blowing that way and how that spark of fire created this thing. And when you have your inner world telling you something is going to come up, then you have more faith, I think.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people with very specific prayers for outcomes, and I just kind of got into a place where I don't know really what the right outcome is. Who am I to know that? So I try to surrender and just know, affirm or pray for highest good, and knowing that something good will come out of these fires. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not trying to minimize anyone's pain, but I do trust that that the universe is going to bring forth something good out of this.
Yeah, and I don't want this to come across in the wrong way, but
Uh-huh.
the earth is much bigger than us, and
Uh-huh.
it's continuously balancing itself out, and the weather is one of the ways where it does that. It creates a tornado and creates fires, and it's not always about us as much as us humans like to think that everything is about us. Sometimes it's about something much greater. It's about the earth doing its job, just like us. If we feel sick or sleepy, we go to sleep. And sometimes the earth is doing its stuff, and we have to trust it too. That's where having a bigger picture really does help, and knowing that there's an inner world that we have access to, which goes from your spirit guides to your soul to angels, archangels. So many people and so many, not people, so many resources are available to us, and they tend to have a bigger picture than we do. So when we tap into that, it kind of soothes us in some ways, especially at times like this.
Yeah, I agree. That's where I was going to go next. I was going to ask if you might want to identify some of the helpers out there. There's the angels, there's the archangels, there's the collective. There's like a
I,
collective.
I think we all have collectives, and we have them in our regular life. We find friends who think the same way as we do, and our soul has collectives where it's like-minded souls and points of consciousness that have the same intention, and that's what a collective is. That's why a lot of channels, when they channel, they say we. They're talking about a collective because it's really a group of like-minded souls that we have access to. The thing is, we have access to so much. We have access to people that have died before. We have access to collectives. We have access to many, many, many different ways of many different people, many different ways of thinking. And when we're just tuned into our regular life, it's like we're tuned into one single channel. And sometimes it's good to watch the other channels or to resource other information. And I think that's really helpful. The problem for a lot of people is they want to know where it's coming from. They need to know because people love to put names and labels on it. But sometimes half of the message might have come from your spirit guide, and the other half came from the collective. So it's good to be open to what comes through. I did devote a chapter to where we're connecting to. And if it really does help for you to figure out who your messenger is, then do it. Figure it out. Ask, and it will be delivered. And for me, it's a collective. When I tap into my inner world, I usually tap into a collective. And I ask, I'm like, are you the collective? Are you a collective? And I'll get a yes answer. And that's usually who I tap into. But I really would love to know my spirit guide. There's a woman that I just did an interview with, and her spirit guide is who taps into the other worlds for her. And because she's comfortable talking to her spirit guide. So she receives a lot of the information through the spirit guide. But the spirit guide is still tapping into a tapestry of worlds.
That's so interesting. You also talk about how we really aren't able to fully access God. Like that's just too big, too much, and that we're getting some sort of fragment.
Yeah, I think stillness is the only way we tap into God and the true essence of God. I think we're all God in different forms. Every
Mhm.
single thing I talk about, every single thing I look at, everything is God being expressed in a different form because it's all comes from the same energy. It all comes from the same material, which is God. So we are accessing God right now as we're talking. But if you want to talk to the true essence of God, I think stillness is the only way we can do it. And it's through a feeling, not a mental thing. And when we try to verbalize it, we will butcher it. But, that's why meditation is so important. But life is about feeling things, not necessarily knowing things. I think our feeling has much of a broader bandwidth of what it can bring into us than our thoughts.
And the thing that's interesting about that is I think overall our culture is about suppressing feelings, not validating feelings. And it's really all about thoughts in your mind. And if you have a feeling, you stuff it somewhere and it ends up in the shadows, the basement of your soul somewhere. And it's just not something that we have a lot of agility around because of our culture.
Yeah, and that's changing, I've noticed. There's EQ, emotional intelligence, coming around. There are teachers that talk about your feelings being a direct communication from your soul. There are schools devoted, I'm talking about like elementary schools, about social emotional learning. My children go to schools like a school like that.
That's
And
cool.
so I think it's changing, but the most important thing to know is that it doesn't matter if you screw it up or not. Life is good. We all end up in the same place. I really don't believe that we can mess up, because we can always, relearn or redo. And the universe has a really great way, or God has a great way of presenting new opportunities if you need to learn something and you don't learn it the first time around. And that's what I think is beautiful about this, the way that it's set up, that if you don't learn something, if you make a mistake, there will be a new opportunity to correct that.
I completely get that. Yes, completely agree. We're coming close to the end of our hour. I'm curious about who comes to you. Like you say, you teach intuition. So who is coming to you, and do they share why they're coming to you?
Generally, to be honest, it's mostly women, and
Okay.
they're
Well, yeah.
generally in the second half of their lives, where they've kind of done the things they were supposed to do, and they've played the roles that they were supposed to play, and now it's all about what's next, what's my purpose, why am I here? And I think those are the people that generally seek me out. I tend to have a very specific demographic of women over 45, I would say, that are just curious about what else is there, and they want to tap into their fullest potential. And those are the ones that find me generally. But there's always an exception, because I have a lot of men, but the men that I have are usually gay men who are more in touch with their femininity,
Okay.
because I think, I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of straight people too, but I've never had, well, I guess that's wrong. I just taught a class on intuition, and the two people, oh wow, two people who were really profoundly moved were both straight men. So I guess there is a shift, but that was the first time. It's usually not like that, but we'll see.
I definitely get the second half of life part. That makes sense. We do all of our ego social stuff and, whatever it is, our careers, our children, our whatever it is, we're kind of on that squirrel wheel. And then we're like, what is life? I mean, some people like you, and most of the people I interview on my podcast have had another sense since the beginning or very early in their life. But most people aren't really reflecting until later, when things just aren't really quite working right, or it's like there has to be more, or why am I here? And so it makes sense that you would get that, 50 plus or 45 plus group.
I love that. I think it's wonderful. And I think, in the beginning, when you're really young, you're just exploring the physical world. I mean, I was exploring the physical world and the metaphysical world. I was very obsessed with both. But at the same time, the physical world was very, very intoxicating, to the point where I had to have the dream that said, "You are having a son," and showed me my child, and changed the trajectory of my life completely. And that was my soul saying, "Hey, you're a little too obsessed with the physical world right now, and you've lost your way." And when I say lost your way, it doesn't mean that I was doing anything horrible. It just means I wasn't following my calling.
Yes.
And it was after my son was born that I quit the job that I had and enrolled in school and learned about psychology, or got my psych degree and all that stuff, just so I can create a balanced world between the metaphysical world and science. And it was all because I had a child, and that child was because I had a dream. I would have never had a child. I didn't think it was possible for me to have a child, and now I've got so many.
It's an interesting story in your book. It's a very interesting story. So Happy, first of all, I forgot to ask you, did you name yourself, or were you named Happy as a child?
Happy, something that I got after the near-death experience, because so many people told me that it was not real and I was delusional, and I wanted to kind of stamp it like a tattoo. So somebody called me Happy once, and I resonated with it, and then the next day I introduced myself as Happy. But
I love that.
legally, not professionally or personally, legally, it's my last name because I wanted my kids to have it. So the kids are all the happy twins, and that's kind of cool for me. But
Oh,
only on legal paper, But my name is Happy. I only go by Happy. If you call me Ali, I will not answer.
okay. That's a good choice. Good choice. I have a friend who changed his last name to Awesome. I thought that was a good choice too.
And you get a lot of flack for it too. A lot of people are like, "Is that your real name?" I'm like, "Yes, I've had it for 29 years. So yes, it's my name."
It's my name. Okay, Happy. Do you have any last words or any last message that you want to share? Because I only cover what we covered. I just let the conversation go where it went, but you may have something that it's important for you to convey to my listeners.
Well, one of the most important things I always teach people is that you are always more than you think you are, and you have access to way more than you have access to in this moment. You just have to tune into that frequency. So when I'm having not feeling well and things aren't going well in my life, the thoughts that come to me are very limited, and the ideas that I have are very limited. So I'm only as good as my current state. So I always have to remind myself that all I have access to is what my current state implies. And then if I change my state, I have access to a lot more. So I don't get stuck in a rut. So I always tell people you're way more resourceful than you think. Just wait till you're in the correct state or better state before you tap in. And that's basically it. I mean, I think everyone has their own answers. I have this hypnotherapy session that I do. It's called at inner voice or something. I forget what it's called. It's tapping into your inner voice. People bring me their questions. I take them as deep as they allow me to go, and then I ask them their own questions. And people always have the answer to their problems once I take them down deep. And then I have their subconscious show them their life, what it would look like if they follow their own advice. That has by far been the most successful practice that I do, is that particular session, because people really realize they had the answers all along, and you do.
Mhm. I love that. We are equipped. I love that. Okay. And in your book, the whole last part is about helping people really do it. It's exercises and it's different ways to get your mind quiet and to access or allow your intuition to inform you. So anybody who's listening and going, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know how to do this, you laid it out in the second half of your book.
I hope I did a good job.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. To full disclosure, I read the whole first half, and then I had to skim the last half.
Fine.
Yeah,
It's when the time is right, the book will call you, you know,
right,
to it.
right. That is so true. That is so true. So I'll have links to all your stuff in the show notes, and this has just been really a fun conversation. I think your life is so interesting. And I have so many takeaways, but one of them is that belief, just having the belief that I'm an intuitive, that's a start versus this, I'm not an intuitive, but you are. I think that's just huge amongst all the other things that you shared with us. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And would bless all of California, Los Angeles, and may the fires subside and peace be restored in that area. It's just so tough. So I know you're right in the middle of it, literally. So again, I appreciate you spending time on this day.
Thank you for sending out that prayer. I've got a lot of family and friends that are sending me videos of what used to be their homes.
So much loss. Yeah. So much loss. And also, thank you for reminding us that the world is bigger. There's a bigger perspective, and we always think it's about us, but there's something always much bigger going on. So that may or may not be comforting to people at this time, but overall, it's something, it is true. So, all right, everybody, thank you for joining me. And I now close the Spiritual Forum.